Seeing red, white, and blue is quite an interesting experience. The beginning was boring, the middle was really good fun, and then the final third was problematic for the most part. There's also a grammatical error that really wound me up, but is it thankful? The grammatical error is not the biggest problem with this, so I think that's maybe not a thankful thing. But I will talk about that at the very end. But there will be spoilers as I discuss what happens in this Popeye animation, as I do want to go into a little bit of detail. This was released in 1943. It's a Famous Studios cartoon directed by Dan Gordon and James Tyer. It's written by Joe Stultz, with a voice cast including Jack Mercer as Popeye and Dave Barry as Bluto, and it was definitely a roller coaster. It was very boring to begin with. Bluto receives a letter saying that he has to now enlist in the army. This is, of course, 1943, in the middle of the Second World War, and he doesn't want to do it. He tries to get out of it, but Popeye, who is at the desk for enlisting people, is doing everything he can to make Bluto enlist, and it gets quite creative in the middle, and it's fun, and it defies logic with some of the animation, as cartoons often do. That's the joy of cartoons, of course, and it's good fun. It's a little chaotic, it's unpredictable, it's creative. It works well. And then they end up in an orphanage, and there are little children there. And all of a sudden, these little children transform into stereotypes of Japanese people. Now again, 1943, I understand why they're presenting these stereotypes, because the Japanese army is of course the enemy, or one of the enemies, but at the same time, especially on babies, well, they're not babies, they're toddlers, young children, but still, it's a bizarre sight, and obviously it's not pleasant to look at. It's uncomfortable. But then we also see Hitler, and it becomes very anti-Nazi. And I don't have a problem with that aspect of it, of course. So it's kind of awkward propaganda in some ways, but the anti-Nazi aspect, I'm not even sure I can say that word on YouTube, but thankfully I have a ridiculous accent. Let's hope that it doesn't detect that. That part of it, there are some strange sounds coming out of his mouth as well. It's a very bizarre moment, but certainly I don't have an issue with that aspect of it. But yeah, the bit before that is uncomfortable and unnecessary, and well, the animation style's consistent. I'll credit where it's due. The design of the characters is consistent. The characterizing, the caricature aspect, that's consistent. I'm trying to find credit where it's due, but honestly, it's very difficult to look at a room full of young children dressed as Japanese stereotypes, and there's not really much I can praise there. And then at the very end, we do have a grammatical error, and as I said, this isn't the biggest problem with the cartoon, which in itself is a big deal, but there was a sign that comes up on screen that says, "Is there a doctor in the house?" But they then score out doctor, and they put undertaker. You can imagine what's happened to one of the characters. But the sign now reads, "Is there a undertaker?" Whereas, of course, it should say an undertaker. So they should have scored out doctor, they should have written undertaker, and then they should have put an N next to the A. And I know it's such a teeny detail, but grammar is my life. So it really annoyed me. But then again, I sat with it and thought, well, hang on. Compared with other things that happen in the cartoon, not really a big deal. Comparatively not a big issue. So yeah, I can't really complain too much about that. I'm going to, but I probably shouldn't. The rest of it is a lot more awkward. Yes, there are bits of this that work well. The beginning is a little boring. The middle is creative. The pacing of the middle is brilliant. Bluto and Popeye, their interactions are good fun. And then they get to the orphanage and things take a really uncomfortable turn. And then we meet Hitler, and yeah, the ending's quite bizarre. And then we have the grammatical issue, which for me was just the irritation to end all irritations. Do I recommend it? I have no idea. For historical purposes, to analyse this war propaganda, to see the approaches that Famous Studios took, yes, I recommend it. For the entertainment aspect, well, let's say the first 2/3. It's a bit boring to begin with, but the first 2/3, sure. The final third, not so much. Apart from the very, very end. Some of the sound effects are quite bizarre. Check it out if you're curious. Seeing Red, White and Blue is definitely never going to be my favourite Popeye cartoon. It's not the most comfortable, but historically, it's certainly quite interesting.